The clash between Ricky Gervais and Piers Morgan didn't just unfold, it detonated, turning what should have been a standard promotional interview into a full-blown televised spectacle that viewers are still replaying and arguing about. When Ricky walked onto the set, the mood seemed light, even playful. Piers greeted him with a wide grin, praising him as one of the sharpest comedic minds of his generation. Ricky responded with his trademark dry humor, poking fun at the show, the cameras, and even himself. For a brief moment, everything felt like it was moving in the usual rhythm of a late-night interview. But beneath the surface, tension was quietly simmering, and it didn't take long before it erupted. The turning point came when Piers shifted from jokes to pointed commentary about Ricky's comedy style. He asked whether Ricky ever regretted the backlash that follows some of his routines, suggesting that certain jokes don't age well, or cross the invisible line. Ricky brushed it off, insisting that comedy exists to challenge, provoke, and sometimes unsettle, that trying to sanitize humor defeats its purpose. The audience chuckled at his quips, but Piers was clearly aiming for something deeper, something more confrontational. Instead of moving on, he doubled down, pressing Ricky to admit that he sometimes enjoys the outrage more than the laughter. Ricky's expression shifted. The smile faded, replaced by a cool, guarded look. He said that people choose to be offended, and that comedians cannot shape their material around the most sensitive audience member in the room. Piers responded by listing older jokes, reading them aloud with deliberate gravity, stripping them of context and tone. It felt less like an interview and more like an interrogation. Ricky tried to turn it into humor by saying Piers could make a nursery rhyme sound like a criminal confession if he read it dramatically enough. The audience laughed again, but Piers didn't crack. Things escalated when Piers accused him of hiding behind comedy to avoid responsibility. Ricky fired back sharply, pointing out the hypocrisy of a journalist criticizing someone else for stirring up reactions when Piers himself thrives on controversy. Ricky said he wasn't the one creating headlines out of thin air, he just told jokes, while Piers framed them as societal threats for ratings. The entire atmosphere shifted, becoming tense and electric. Even the crew seemed to hesitate, unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation play out. Piers kept pushing, saying Ricky was dodging accountability, accusing him of mocking vulnerable groups. Ricky countered that comedy targets everyone equally, and that selective outrage says more about the offended person than the joke itself. He added that the real danger wasn't a comedian on a stage but the culture of policing humor, where everyone wants to dictate what can or can't be said. That's when Piers said, with a smirk, that for someone who claims not to care about opinions, Ricky seemed unusually rattled. That did it. Ricky stood up abruptly, unclipped his microphone, and announced that there was no point continuing a conversation framed like a courtroom drama instead of an interview. Piers tried to call him back, insisting he was just asking questions, but Ricky didn't turn around. The audience fell into stunned silence as he walked off the set, leaving Piers sitting alone, visibly thrown off balance. Within minutes of the episode airing, social media exploded. Clips spread like wildfire, with people dissecting each moment, taking sides, creating memes, and debating whether Ricky was justified or overly sensitive, whether Piers was conducting journalism or baiting his guest. What should have been a routine interview became a cultural moment, intense, unpredictable, and unforgettable. From the moment Ricky Gervais settled into his chair opposite Piers Morgan, it was clear their conversation wouldn't follow the usual predictable rhythm of late-night interviews. Both men are known for their sharp tongues and refusal to back down when confronted, and that combination created a volatile atmosphere that only needed one spark to ignite. The opening moments were smooth enough, with Ricky tossing out casual jokes and Piers leaning into his role as the provocative interviewer. But beneath the light laughter and polite exchanges, the energy felt charged, like two boxers circling each other before the first punch is thrown. The shift began subtly when Piers brought up the controversies surrounding Ricky's stand-up specials. He noted that Ricky had become the most complained about comedian of the decade, and asked whether he ever felt he had crossed ethical boundaries. Ricky responded with a grin, saying that comedy is meant to push buttons and that the moment a comedian tries to please everyone, the craft loses its edge. But Piers was looking for something more than a philosophical answer. He wanted a confession, an admission of guilt. He asked Ricky to explain why certain jokes offended so many people, implying that Ricky was deliberately targeting sensitive topics. Ricky countered by saying that jokes exist in context, and taking them out of context is like pulling a single puzzle piece and pretending it represents the entire picture. He added that most people understand satire, but a loud minority prefers to interpret jokes at face value because outrage is easier than nuance. The audience responded with laughter and applause, showing they were clearly on Ricky's side at that point. But Piers, sensing the room's support for Ricky, pushed harder, perhaps hoping to redirect the energy. He started citing specific lines from Ricky's shows, reading them slowly, as if presenting evidence in a courtroom. The delivery stripped them of humor entirely, turning them into sterile, isolated statements. Ricky grew visibly irritated. He leaned forward and told Piers that a comedian's material cannot be judged like a legal document, because comedy relies on tone, timing, and persona, elements that completely disappear on a cue card. Piers challenged him again, asking whether comedians often use the art excuse to dodge responsibility. Ricky shot him a piercing look, and for a brief moment the studio fell silent. The turning point came when Piers claimed that Ricky was hiding behind irony. Ricky responded with a biting remark, saying that if anyone in the room specialized in hiding behind things, it was Piers, specifically behind outrage-driven journalism. He accused Piers of manufacturing moral panic while pretending to be the guardian of public decency. The audience reacted with a mix of shocked gasps and nervous laughter, sensing the conversation was no longer entertainment but confrontation. Piers, unwilling to lose ground, insisted that he was simply asking the questions viewers wanted answers to. Ricky disagreed, saying Piers was asking questions designed to create viral clips rather than genuine discussion. He pointed out that Piers often invited controversial guests just so he could antagonize them and then claim journalistic high ground. Piers attempted to respond, but Ricky was already on a roll, calling the entire interview a pre-written trap disguised as dialogue. Their back and forth grew sharper, each exchange more heated than the last. Piers accused Ricky of being sensitive to criticism, Ricky accused Piers of being obsessed with headlines. Piers smirked, Ricky glared. The audience watched, enthralled and uneasy, as the two personalities clashed. With increasing intensity. Finally, when Piers repeated that Ricky was afraid to answer honestly, something inside Ricky snapped. He took off his microphone with deliberate calm, stood up, and said he wasn't going to sit there and play the villain in a script Piers had already decided on. He walked off the set while the cameras struggled to follow him, leaving Piers staring after him in disbelief. What followed online was instant chaos, debates, memes, short clips, and endless commentary. Some hailed Ricky for refusing to be cornered, others argued he should have stayed and fought back verbally. But one thing was undeniable: the clash had become the moment of the night, overshadowing everything else and cementing itself as one of the most dramatic exits in recent TV history. The atmosphere in the studio was charged from the very beginning, even if neither Ricky Gervais nor Piers Morgan acknowledged it outright. Ricky walked in with his usual mischievous grin, the kind that suggested he was ready for anything: jokes, jabs, even controversy. Piers, on the other hand, had that familiar gleam in his eye, the one he gets when he senses an opportunity for a fiery exchange. Both men thrive on unpredictability, and that made their encounter feel like a spark hovering dangerously close to a powder keg. The audience felt it too, leaning forward in their seats with the instinct that something extraordinary might unfold. The interview began pleasantly enough, with light questions about Ricky's latest projects and his global comedy tours. Ricky joked about the absurdity of fame, the extremes of cancel culture, and how he still can't believe people take comedians so seriously. Piers laughed along, but after a few minutes he shifted gears. With a subtle change in tone, he brought up the controversy surrounding Ricky's most recent stand-up special, mentioning the online protests, the petitions, and the heated debates about comedic boundaries. Ricky raised his eyebrows, already sensing where the conversation was headed. Piers asked whether Ricky felt any moral responsibility for the backlash his jokes sometimes generate. Ricky responded calmly, saying comedy is about pushing limits, exploring contradictions, and questioning societal norms. It's not meant to soothe, it's meant to provoke thought. But Piers wasn't satisfied with that answer. He asked if Ricky ever considered toning down his humor to match the expectations of a more sensitive audience. Ricky shook his head, saying that comedians should never shape their art to appease the loudest critics. That should have ended the topic, but Piers decided to escalate. He pulled out specific quotes from Ricky's show, reading them with an exaggerated seriousness that stripped them of all comedic flavor. The audience murmured uncomfortably, sensing the tension rise. Ricky leaned back, folded his arms, and stared at Piers with a half-amused, half-annoyed expression. He pointed out that when comedy is removed from its context, it becomes nothing more than a collection of sentences, and anyone can twist sentences into something harmful if they want to. Piers countered by saying that comedians often hide behind context as a shield to avoid accountability. That comment struck a nerve. Ricky sat up straighter and told Piers that he was confusing artistic expression with malice, and that society is becoming too eager to assume the worst intentions. He added that offense is subjective, and no comedian can create material safe enough for everyone. Piers fired back by saying that if Ricky truly believed in freedom of speech, he should be willing to defend his jokes instead of deflecting criticism. The audience reacted audibly to that remark. Ricky, now visibly agitated, accused Piers of trying to create drama rather than facilitate genuine conversation. He said Piers was twisting the interview into a spectacle designed to go viral. Piers didn't deny it, instead claiming that heated moments often reveal the truth. Ricky shook his head and said that all this revealed was Piers's obsession with stirring outrage. The argument spiraled quickly. Each response became sharper, more personal, more charged. Piers accused Ricky of acting superior, Ricky accused Piers of baiting him intentionally. Their words overlapped, the audience caught in the crossfire of clashing egos and rising tempers. It no longer felt like an interview, it felt like a duel. Finally, after Piers suggested that Ricky was afraid to face serious questions, Ricky decided he'd had enough. He slowly unclipped his microphone, set it down on the table, and stood up. The studio went silent. Without raising his voice, he said he wasn't interested in participating in a show that cared more about conflict than conversation. Piers called after him, insisting he stay and finish the discussion, but Ricky didn't turn back. He walked off the set with steady, deliberate steps. The moment he left, social media erupted. Clips circulated instantly, sparking countless debates. Some viewers praised Ricky for refusing to be cornered, others argued he should have remained to defend his humor. But no matter the opinion, everyone agreed on one thing: the clash between Ricky Gervais and Piers Morgan wasn't just another TV moment. It was a cultural flashpoint, a dramatic collision of personalities that people would be talking about long after the cameras stopped rolling.